What if the man your whole family laughed at turned out to own everything you stand on? He wore dusty boots, drove an old truck, and didn't say much. But when the truth hit, their faces went pale, their laughter died, and their lives were never the same. Stay with us, because the moment they discover who he really is, it will leave you speechless. It was supposed to be a quiet homecoming, a visit to the place where Elena Whitmore was born and raised, a modest family reunion in the countryside. But from the moment the dusty pickup truck rolled onto the gravel driveway of the Whitmore estate, the air turned heavy with judgment. A man stepped out first, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and rough hands. He wore scuffed leather boots, worn-out jeans, and a plain gray t-shirt stretched across a chest that had clearly known labor. His name was Jack, and by the look of him, he didn't belong. Not here, not in this carefully curated gathering of self-important aunts, uncles, and cousins who mistook polished shoes for worth. Elena stepped out after him, radiant even in her simple linen dress, her hand slipping quietly into his, but no amount of grace on her part could stop what came next. "Is that him?" Aunt Janice's voice cut through the air like a knife, laced with disbelief and disdain. "That's her husband, Lord. He looks like he just patched a roof." A ripple of laughter followed. Tight, poisonous, meant to sting. Cousin Rachel didn't bother lowering her voice. She used to date a lawyer in Chicago. What happened? Couldn't afford better. Jack gave a soft nod, polite but unreadable. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence said more than their insults ever could, but they didn't stop. They never do when they think they're safe in numbers. Uncle Todd, beer in hand, muttered to no one in particular, thought she was the smart one in the family. Guess beauty doesn't buy brains. Jack helped carry in a box of peaches, offered to fix the squeaky screen door, smiled at the kids who stared at him like he was some hired help. No one thanked him. No one even looked him in the eye. Elena squeezed his arm. "I'm sorry," she whispered, shame rising like bile in her throat. But Jack just shrugged. This is nothing new. Then the door opened, and out stepped Grandma Whitmore, sharp-eyed, unsmiling, and in full command of her court. She looked Jack up and down with visible disappointment. "We set the table for family only," she said coldly. The silence was suffocating. Elena froze. Jack extended a hand anyway. "Jack Hamilton, it's a pleasure, ma'am," but her hands never moved. She turned her back. "Elena, come inside. He can wait out here." Elena's mouth opened in protest, but Jack gently touched her shoulder. "It's fine," he said with a small smile. "I'll get some air." He walked off toward the fields, the laughter following him like a trail of ash. But no one noticed how straight he stood, how calm he remained, how his eyes lingered on the crumbling barn in the distance. As if he were already imagining how to rebuild it, the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the Whitmore estate. But the mood inside the house darkened with every passing minute. Jack wasn't invited in. Not officially. They found a way to use him. Uncle Todd clapped him on the back with mock friendliness and pointed to the crooked fence out back. "You look like you know your way around tools. Why don't you make yourself useful?" "Huh." The others laughed, thinking themselves clever. Jack nodded once, walked to the shed, and picked up a hammer without a word. He didn't complain, didn't flinch, didn't even glance back at the dozens of eyes watching him from behind the curtain. Inside, Elena sat alone at the long dining table, surrounded by smirks and condescending glances. A cousin leaned in, wine swirling in her glass, and said with false sweetness, "Elena, you could have done so much better. We all thought you were going to marry someone." Accomplished. The room chuckled. Another voice chimed in. "You really downgraded? From Ivy League to—" "What concrete league?" Someone else laughed. "She married a walking Home Depot." Phones started coming out, some discreetly, others openly. Aunt Janice recorded a quick video and whispered to the camera, "This is what happens when you think with your heart instead of your head." Poor Elena. Tragic. The video hit social media in minutes, complete with emojis and sarcastic hashtags. Builder Bay. One cousin posted. In the comments, Strangers laughed at the idea of a glamorous woman marrying a man who looks like he sleeps in his truck. Outside, Jack kept working, replacing loose boards and straightening hinges. He didn't say a word, even when the youngest nephew ran out and said, "Mom says you should eat outside. Your clothes are dirty." Jack smiled kindly. "That's all right, kid. I like the breeze." Then came the kicker. Grandma's voice was loud and clear from the porch. "Make sure he eats on the paper plates. We don't want the good china broken." Laughter roared like a wildfire. Elena stood up, fists clenched, her chest tight with fury. But Jack raised one finger from where he knelt at the fence, barely looking up. A silent message. Not yet. The elders mocked his silence as weakness. The younger ones shared his photos in group chats, captioning them with memes. One cousin held up a napkin and said, "Hey Jack, you want to wipe the dirt off your hands, or is that too high class?" The room burst out laughing again. Elena could barely breathe. Her heart pounded with rage and shame. But Jack simply turned a screw, tested the post, and moved on to the next task, calm as a king who knew something they didn't. No one noticed how precisely he worked, how each movement was efficient, practiced. Oh, masterful. They only saw the dirt under his nails, not the foundation of power behind his silence. They thought he was beneath them. They were digging their own graves. The next day was worse. The Whitmore family had arranged a grand outdoor lunch. A showy affair with white linen tables, silver cutlery, and catered dishes meant to impress the neighbors. Everyone was invited, but Jack wasn't welcome. He arrived quietly beside Elena, still dressed in simple jeans and a clean button-up shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing calloused hands that had seen more work than any man at that table. The moment he stepped into the garden, all conversation faltered. Forks paused mid-air, eyes narrowed. Then came the laughter, soft at first, then louder. "Didn't know we hired help for this," someone muttered, loud enough to hear. A teen cousin strutted over with a smirk and handed Jack a tray of drinks. "Since you're already dressed for it, might as well make yourself useful." "Right." Jack looked at him calmly and said nothing, placing the tray gently on the nearest table. Elena's face was flushed, not with embarrassment, but fury. She reached for Jack's hand, but he squeezed hers lightly. "Let it play out," he whispered, his voice steady. But the storm was just beginning. One of the uncles, Harold, loud and self-important, stood up, clinked his glass for attention. "Let's raise a toast," he said, lips curled in a smug grin, "to our dear Elena and her brave decision to follow love instead of logic." Laughter rippled across the lawn. Then, the moment that would be replayed 1,000,000 times online happened. Rachel, drunk on wine and arrogance, walked up to Jack carrying a plate of ribs. "Hope you're hungry," she said sweetly, then tripped. The plate crashed into Jack's chest, barbecue sauce smearing down his shirt like blood. Gasps. Then a beat of silence. Then laughter. Cruel, unfiltered, unstoppable. "Oops," Rachel giggled, covering her mouth. "Guess he's used to messes anyway." Jack stood still. Sauce dripped slowly onto the grass. A child nearby asked, "Is he homeless?" The crowd erupted. Phones were recording. Some people were even live streaming, zooming in on Jack's stained shirt, panning to Elena's horror-stricken face. Jack slowly knelt, picked up the broken plate, wiped the sauce off the grass with a napkin, and looked up. His eyes calm, focused, dangerous. "No harm done," he said softly. That's when Elena's father stood up, arms crossed, face red with pride and anger. "I can't watch this anymore," he barked. "You married a man who can't hold a conversation, can't hold a fork, and certainly can't hold a place at this table. You've embarrassed this family long enough." Silence dropped like a hammer. Every eye turned to Jack, waiting. Would he shout? Would he walk away? Would he cry? But Jack did none of those things. Instead, he stood, tall, composed. The sauce-stained shirt was clinging to his broad shoulders like battle armor. He looked each of them in the eye, one by one, then slowly smiled. A quiet, knowing smile that sent a chill through the air. Then he turned his gaze to Elena, "Thank you for bringing me," he said, his voice calm and even. "Now I know exactly who your family is." And in that moment, just before the next chapter of their humiliation began, something shifted. No one could name it, but they felt it, like the sky pulling back before a storm. It happened the moment the first raindrop hit Jack's shoulder. The laughter had faded into uneasy silence, the family frozen in their smug poses, some still clutching their phones, others too stunned to speak. Then the gates creaked open. A sleek black SUV rolled slowly onto the gravel path, tires crunching with authority. It was out of place, too elegant, too deliberate for this rural chaos. The car door opened, and a woman stepped out, tall, poised, dressed in a dark navy suit with the unmistakable sharpness of someone who ran empires for breakfast. Her heels clicked with precision as she approached, her eyes scanning the crowd like she'd done it 1,000 times in boardrooms across continents. No one recognized her, yet no one could look away. She stopped in front of Jack, looked him straight in the eye, and with a firm nod said, "Sir, your 2 o'clock board meeting is ready. Would you prefer we bring the helicopter around now or delay until after the estate review?" The crowd stiffened like a single organism. You could hear the wind shift. Grandma's fork slipped from her hand. Elena's father paled. Rachel's mouth dropped open, sauce still smeared on her fingers. Jack didn't look surprised. He simply reached into his back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. Simple, scratched, but inside gleamed a solid black titanium card etched with his name, Jack Hamilton, Chairman, Hamilton Global Infrastructure. The woman continued, unfazed by the stunned faces around her. "The Prime Minister's office has called twice, and the governor's assistant is on hold. Do you want me to tell them you're unavailable for another hour?" Jack tilted his head slightly, his voice suddenly cold, precise, and far removed from the man they'd mocked. "Let them wait. I have some unfinished business here." Then he turned, faced the crowd, and for the first time, really looked at them. His eyes were different now. Not gentle, not reserved. They were sharp, commanding, lethal. "I built cities," he said quietly. "Hospitals, bridges, towers you take photos of and don't even know who laid their foundations. I've sat with kings, negotiated with presidents, and run a company that owns more land than this entire county. And yet, not one of you bothered to ask my name before deciding my worth. No one moved, no one breathed." Jack turned slowly toward Elena's father. "You wanted to know who I am. Let me make it clear. I'm the man who just bought the debt on your property. I'm the reason your construction permit will be denied next month. I'm the one who gave you a chance to show me who you are. And you failed." His words fell like iron. The woman in the suit stepped closer and added, almost as an afterthought, "We've already acquired 80% of the land surrounding this estate. Sir, shall we begin demolition plans on schedule?" Gasps rippled through the family like an earthquake. Jack didn't answer immediately. He looked to Elena, who stood rooted in place, tears in her eyes. Not from sadness, but awe. Then he turned back to the woman and said softly, "No, not yet. Let's see how honest apologies sound when people have something to lose." And just like that, the storm broke. Oh, not just in the sky, but in every trembling heart on that lawn. The air turned electric, thick with disbelief, faces frozen in contorted masks of shock as Jack Hamilton. No longer the silent, sauce-stained husband, but a man cloaked in raw, undisguised power, stood alone at the center of the storm he had allowed to build. Uncle Todd stepped back, eyes darting toward the SUV, stammering something about a misunderstanding. But Jack didn't even glance at him. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a sleek folder, unassuming, leather-bound, and opened it with deliberate precision. Inside were deeds, contracts, blueprints, satellite images. Every page bore the Hamilton Holdings seal and the unmistakable stamp of confidential. He held up one page slowly, turning it toward the crowd. "This," he said, his voice slicing through the silence like a blade, "is the acquisition agreement for Whitmore Properties, effective as of last Friday. Your land, your legacy, your pride, bought and signed under one of my subsidiaries. At market value. Of course, Aunt Janice gasped. Rachel took a step back. Someone whispered, "He owns this." Jack didn't blink. "Correction," he said coldly. "I own you." Then came the second twist. The woman in the navy suit tapped her earpiece and turned toward Jack. "Sir, the media is asking for a comment. Word has spread. They're calling this the billionaire in boots story, trending across every platform. Over 12 million views and climbing." Murmurs exploded. Phones buzzed with alerts. Videos posted just hours ago of Jack being mocked, being humiliated. Were now plastered with hashtags like King in Jeans and Quiet Power. The internet, as it always does, had turned. Jack's name was everywhere. And the family, they weren't just humiliated anymore. They were exposed. Jack turned toward Grandma Whitmore, the same woman who had told him there was no seat for him at the family table. "You wanted class," he said quietly, "but all you had was arrogance." Then he faced Elena's father, who stood frozen, unable to meet Jack's gaze. "You told your daughter she embarrassed the family, but you don't understand. She's the reason I gave you all a chance. Her kindness, her belief, her heart, that's wealth. Not your titles, not your shoes, not your empty pride." Silence again, thick and suffocating. Jack stepped forward, toward the man who had tried to break him publicly, and said the words that would echo forever in that town. "You thought you were testing me, but I was testing all of you." He paused, then added, "And you failed." The fallout was immediate. Jack didn't need to raise his voice. His words alone carried the weight of reckoning. He turned slightly toward the woman in the navy suit and said with chilling calm, "Begin the removals." She nodded once and tapped her tablet. Within seconds, messages fired off, commands executed, contracts revoked. A loud ding echoed from Uncle Todd's phone. He looked down and paled. "My construction contract. It's been canceled," he whispered. "Effective immediately." The woman confirmed. "Due to conflict of interest and unethical conduct." He staggered back, nearly dropping his drink. "But I have a loan due next week." This job was everything. Jack didn't look at him. "Then maybe you should have thought twice before treating people like dirt under your boots." Next came Rachel. She stepped forward, face pale, lips trembling. "Jack, I didn't mean any of it. It was a joke." "Please, I didn't know." Jack turned to her, gaze colder than ice. "You dumped food on me. You mocked my wife. And you laughed when a child asked if I was homeless. Tell me, Rachel, do you think that's something I should forget?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came. Her phone vibrated again. She looked down, and her knees buckled. "My influencer brand account? It's been shut down. Someone flagged it." The woman in the suit stepped forward. "Hamilton Holdings just bought the agency managing your contracts. You're no longer a client." Rachel looked at Jack, a desperate mix of regret and horror in her eyes. "You can't ruin me like this." Jack took a single step forward. "I'm not ruining you. I'm revealing you." All around them, the air grew thicker with consequences. A cousin who had secretly applied for a Hamilton Foundation scholarship was notified of rejection due to behavioral red flags. A neighbor who had filmed Jack and added mocking captions found his video had been flagged by the platform, and his account permanently banned. Even Grandma Whitmore wasn't spared. Her pride and joy. An antique shop she often boasted about was built on rented land. Jack turned to her and said softly, "You might want to start packing. The new owner wants a bakery in that location. Lease ends in 2 weeks." Her face drained of color. "You're evicting me." Jack's jaw tightened. "No. You evicted me the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for your table. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. Or clean, swift, absolute." The crowd that once laughed now stood in stunned silence. The balance of power fully and irreversibly shifted. Jack turned his back on them, not out of spite, but finality. The judgment they once wielded was now a mirror, showing them everything they were too blind to see, but not everyone had failed the test. As Jack walked away from the trembling crowd, he paused near the back porch, where an old man sat in a worn-out chair. The same man Jack had helped fix the broken fence for just a day earlier. The man had never mocked him, never questioned his worth, only offered him a cold lemonade and said, "Hard work shows in a man's hands." That's something no suit can fake. Jack turned to the woman in the navy suit. His name. She checked her notes. Walter Green, retired school teacher. Lives on a fixed income. Jack nodded. He owns that small blue house near the orchard, doesn't he? Yes, sir. Jack turned to Walter and extended his hand. Your mortgage is paid in full. And your home, yep's yours forever. No taxes, no fees, no strings. Walter blinked, stunned. Why, Jack smiled. Because you were the only man here who treated me like a person. Then came little Hannah, Elena's 12-year-old niece, who had quietly slipped Jack a napkin during lunch when no one else would sit with him. She had whispered, "You can sit with me if you want." Now, she clung to her mother's side, watching the chaos unfold with wide, confused eyes. Jack knelt beside her. "You were brave," he said gently, "and brave kids deserve big futures." He handed her a slim envelope with her name on it. Inside was a full scholarship to the finest school in the state, all expenses paid until college. Hannah gasped. Her mother broke down in tears. And then there was Mr. Castillo, the family's gardener who had worked in silence for 20 years, always overlooked, always underpaid. When Jack had arrived, Mr. Castillo had quietly brought him a towel and said in Spanish, "It's not the hands that matter, it's the heart behind them." Jack called him forward. "From now on," he said, "you're not a gardener. You're the head of estate management. Triple your pay, full benefits, and your son, he starts his internship at Hamilton Global next month." Mr. Castillo's hands shook as he tried to thank him, but Jack simply nodded. Good men don't go unnoticed forever. Elena stood silently behind Jack, tears in her eyes. Not for the wealth, not for the titles, but for the integrity, the justice, the clarity of this moment. She had always known Jack was extraordinary. But now, the world finally saw it too. In a sea of cruelty, Jack had found the ones who were kind, and he lifted them higher than any of them had ever imagined. This wasn't just a reckoning, it was a reward for hearts that had never needed to know a name to recognize a soul. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the shaken faces of the Whitmore family, Jack stepped forward, calm and composed, his voice rising. Not in anger, but in truth. I came here dressed in denim, not to deceive, but to observe. I wanted to know if character still mattered, if love were enough, if family meant anything when there was nothing to gain. He looked around slowly, letting his words sink like anchors. But instead, what I found were people who measured worth by the shine of shoes, the cost of a shirt, the make of a car. You judged before you knew. You mocked before you asked. And you disrespected what you didn't understand. Faces turned away, eyes dropped. But Jack didn't stop. I've been in rooms with billionaires who treat janitors like kings, and I've walked through villages where strangers offered me their last meal with a smile. Dignity has nothing to do with wealth. And today, you proved that poverty isn't measured in dollars, or it's in your lack of grace. His voice cracked, just slightly. My wife believed in you. She believed in roots and tradition and warmth. She brought me here hoping to share that. Instead, she was forced to watch you break everything sacred about what it means to belong. Elena covered her mouth, her tears streaming silently, not from weakness, but from the echoing pain of seeing her past collapse. Jack turned to her, took her hand, and kissed it gently. You stood by me when the world didn't understand. You saw the man, not the mask. And because of you, I learned something too. Being wealthy doesn't make me powerful. Loving you does. The guests now stood as statues, trapped between guilt and awe, while cameras continued to roll, live streams catching every syllable of a man who didn't just speak with money, but with moral force. Jack raised his head toward the crowd one last time. The next time you see someone in worn-out boots, remember this day. Remember that kindness doesn't cost a cent, But cruelty always collects interest. He let the silence stretch, let the shame settle where it belonged. And as the world beyond this backyard exploded in admiration, likes, shares, and tears, a message rippled outward, unstoppable. Dignity is not for sale, respect is not a luxury, and greatness wears many faces. Sometimes even the quiet, rugged face of a man who dared to walk through fire without ever raising his voice. The wind had shifted, no longer stiff with judgment, it now carried a quiet reverence, as if the very trees leaned in to listen. Jack and Elena stood at the edge of the garden, hand in hand, their silhouettes framed by the burnished light of the late afternoon sun. The same people who had once scoffed now stood still, hushed not by force, but by realization. As they turned to leave, no one dared stop them. No one could. The path they walked was lined not with applause, but with silence, thick with reflection, regret, and respect too late. A few feet away, Hannah clutched her scholarship letter like a treasure, her eyes following Jack as though she were watching a hero walk out of a storybook. Mr. Castillo bowed slightly, hand to heart, while Walter, the old school teacher, wiped away a tear with trembling fingers. Jack paused only once more at the entrance gate, where he glanced back at the house behind him, not with hatred, not even with anger, but with the calm finality of a man who had outgrown the place that once tried to define him. "Let's go," he whispered to Elena. "We've got better places to build." And as they stepped into the waiting SUV, the doors closing with a soft click that sounded more like thunder, the crowd slowly began to move, not forward, but inward, into their own guilt, their own shame. Somewhere inside the house, a cousin scrolled her phone and muttered, "He donated $2 million last year to rebuild the children's hospital." Another voice followed, "He paid off veterans' homes across 3 counties." And another, softer still, "He never said a word about any of it." But Jack never needed to say a word. He never asked to be seen. He simply revealed who he was when it mattered most. That evening, a story broke across the nation. Headlines read, "Billionaire tests, his in-laws in disguise. The internet stands with him." Across the country, people watched the footage. They saw the humiliation, the restraint, the revelation, the justice. But more than anything, they saw a man who walked into a storm with nothing but truth, and left it standing taller than ever. And far away, in a different town, a girl who once felt too small to matter stood up in class and gave a speech about dignity, inspired by Jack's story. The teacher asked what it was called. She smiled and said, "It's called Knowing Your Worth." A week later, the internet was still ablaze. News anchors called it the lesson heard around the world. Commentators praised Jack not just for his wealth, but for his silence, his composure, his restraint. Celebrities reposted clips from the garden confrontation. A senator quoted his line, that kindness doesn't cost a cent, but cruelty always collects interest, during a speech on national civility. And yet, Jack himself said nothing. No interviews, no press releases, just silence, powerful, dignified silence. But one final video surfaced. It was captured not by the media, but by a child. The same little girl, Hannah, who had sat with Jack when no one else would. In it, Jack stands outside his truck, dirt still on his boots, holding a small wooden plaque. He speaks softly, without grandeur, to a group of local students gathered at the construction site of the new community center, now being built on the land he once stood, humiliated. "If I leave you with anything," he says, "let it be this. Never measure a person by the clothes they wear or the silence they keep. Some of the strongest people you'll ever meet are the ones who carry their pain quietly, and their power even quieter." He kneels, drives the first nail into the foundation with his own hand, then smiles as the children erupt in cheers. That video becomes the final chapter, watched by millions. And as it fades to black, one final line appears on screen in white letters against silence: "Never underestimate a man in work boots. Because sometimes, the ones you mock are the ones who own the ground beneath your feet." And with that, the story ends. Not with vengeance, not with applause, but with a message seared into the hearts of all who watch Judge less, love more, and always, always choose kindness first,